Okay. Um, I was gonna practice this introduction, but I thought, fuck it, we'll just do it live. Um, Ladies
Oh,
and gentlemen, joining us today is none other than the legal maestro himself, Maxwell Lewis. As an attorney extraordinaire, Maxwell has conquered the bar, been sworn in, and now navigates the realms of timeshare takeovers, AI, crypto, computer science, fantasy football, retail clothing and hat business ownership, and everything in between like a true guru. This marks his triumphant return to the podcast, where we're in for another insightful dive into his multifaceted expertise. Welcome back, Maxwell.
multifaceted expertise. Have you seen the
So,
new? Have you seen the new
wait, let me
Game of
just tell
Thrones
you
show?
this is from ChatGPT, which I thought
Is
was
it?
which I thought was pretty fitting for what we're going to talk about today.
Yeah. The problem is, you can't get ChatGPT to sound like anything other than a douchey, fucking guest speaker introduction. It just always
Yeah.
sounds this way.
Well, and I'm not good at the prompts. So, like, I don't know. It
It
probably
really
could get better than this, but
it takes a little work to get it to write the way you want. Um, and there are like key phrases that I find really helpful, but I don't use ChatGPT as much anymore. I use Claude a lot, which is I'm sure we can get into this later. It just works better for the things that I need. But I did want to make a quick comment that I don't know if you've seen the new was it House of Dragon?
oh yeah,
But
I've seen it.
there's one new episode out, right, of the new season. Did you watch it?
Yeah, I watched it last night actually. I couldn't watch it on Sundays, so I like got it in last
Yeah,
night.
it's good. I'm glad it's on Sundays because then Caitlin and I are less tempted to engage in festivities. But there's when he's introducing him and he's like the magnanimous, and
The
that's the
Magnanimous.
no, it was great. I just thought Maxwell the magnanimous. That's what I want to be known as now.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I
it's
missed
good to be back.
opportunity there. Yeah. I'm glad you are back.
Um, I was your first guest, and
Yes.
you live in an you look like you live in a cottage now. Like I look at this stone fireplace back there. You were such a look at this. You got the stash. You've got the
Yeah.
hipster hat. You are like fully a
Yeah.
mountain man now.
Well, when you get older, it's a good thing to go into mountain man hipster
Yeah. Oh yeah.
cuz it's very hard as a 37-year-old to figure out like if I were to wear what is cool right now, it doesn't really work. Like I look like
Yeah.
I'm trying to pose or be something that I'm not. And also I'm a dad, so it's like, well, should I wear dad stuff? Should I wear old stuff? Sometimes like when the Patagonia quarter zip came out, I was like,
Oh,
okay,
it's perfect.
yeah, it's perfect, right? But then you start seeing like your grandpas wearing it all the time. And then I go to work
Yeah.
conferences and I see people that are, 50s, 60s, and they're wearing like the exact same thing as me. And I'm like, maybe I need to be a little bit more like on top of
No, I
fashion.
don't think
But
it's wrong. Yeah, well, no. Honestly, I think it's a mistake. Like I think a lot of fashion is stupid. And it's just because as a man, attraction, looking attractive as a man, I think is like 99% hygiene and wearing clothes that fit correctly. And
yeah,
unfortunately, I think a lot of guys don't necessarily do those things correctly, but fashion and edgy fashion always seem to be trending somewhere outside of fits correctly. And I'm always like, I can't incorporate that. Uh,
no,
like, and I had a whole, you know, transformative style, right? Where I was like cowboy boots and kind of like designer boot cut jeans. And then I moved to Austin and it wasn't really a thing that anybody wore there. I don't think people really wore it much in Nebraska either, but it was like stovepipe, slim cut jeans, and like leather half boots, which are still kind of in. But people are way more tennis shoe oriented now. Like tennis shoes,
Yeah.
like a
People wear it
lot
in
of
my
people our
world too,
age.
with like
Yeah,
nice suits and stuff.
I think it's weird. I do. I mean,
Do you
I get the
think that,
look.
I think in Nebraska, people just weren't into fashion in general, like at all,
Yeah,
nowhere near as much as in Austin. So I think you standing out was kind of okay because that was part of your identity. But then I think when you went to Austin, people were into fashion. So they kind of
yeah.
knew what was what, and they knew you were different, and they, whether they liked it or not, but
And
the people,
I would still mix it up, right? Like it's a good
yeah,
thing to have, but you can't be wearing that 4 days a week anymore, you know? And now
right.
I almost feel like we're hitting a good era of the tennis shoe comment aside, because I do think tennis shoes and like suits are kind of odd. I think you could do tennis shoes and maybe khakis, and that's not necessarily pushing the envelope. But like this athleisure wear meets um, formal wear, not formal wear, but like dress wear. I think is a really good development for everybody. But because women were kind of already there,
Yeah.
but guys now like Lululemon's got men's pants that are. I'm like, dude, I could probably wear those every day, and it would never feel that uncomfortable, and
The
no one would
Viore
know.
like Tech
Biore.
2.0 pant, you can literally sleep in it, work out in it. You
Hmm.
can wear it with a button up and a tie and tennis
Yeah.
shoes. Like
Well, now
they're
there's
pretty sweet.
even now there are even it's funny because like I bought these tailor-made three suits right before I graduated, and I obviously just wear sweatpants to work, which is just great. But now there's even like um, tailor-made like fabric stretch suits. Like I think like State and Liberty, and I think Mizzen and Maine are you could get them off the rack, or they'll make them for you, and they're kind of expensive. But I'm like, dude, those would never. They're made for like bodybuilders, but athletes. But I'm just like, dude, that's over the course of a month, my waist might fluctuate by like an inch and a half. I might want to like gorge myself one day, and then I might not eat for 2 days, and I need to have pants that will fit both of those days,
Exactly.
right? So
Yeah.
out here solving the big problems.
Hey, I'm into intermittent fasting, so I know
And
what it's like
yeah,
to not eat for days on end.
how do you? Are you ever just like? I guess you kind of get conditioned to it, but are you ever just like, God, I would really would like to eat breakfast right now.
Yeah, well, mostly the way I do it is I eat breakfast and then I don't eat until the next day. And I eat a huge breakfast.
Yeah,
So, and I wake up and work out. And so,
crazy person.
but I'm just saying, like, if I woke up and ate first and then worked out, I think I would get a lot hungrier. But I wake up and like do all this cardio on the bike and then I work out, come in, take half an hour, get the house set up, and then I make a big breakfast and then I get on
Mm,
with my day. And then I drink a lot of water and tea and coffee the rest of the day.
yeah, yeah.
And I don't
That's
do that every day. That's not every day, but I just do it once in a while.
it's good. It's good. The first time I had ever really heard about this was like on Joe Rogan's podcast. He had some dietitian on there who was talking about like there's some like enzyme that your body releases, and they had found that just in general people who did like shift work, like nurses and long shifts, and wouldn't eat during that they had like certain health benefits from it, and so they were correlating these things together. But or maybe I had the inverse there. I can't recall. I don't know if you do 12-hour shifts. If you I wasn't eating when I was doing 12-hour shifts, but I assume some people might be eating more. I don't know. But there's certainly benefits to it. I just my real issue is I'd like to eat two massive meals and nothing in between. I'd
Well,
like
you
to
still
have
can. Some
yeah,
days I
I
do breakfast and lunch and then wait until breakfast the next day.
well, the problem is I want to eat like a whole bag of Doritos at 3 in the morning, and then I want to eat like a massive, probably 11:30. I want to have like a big lunch, and then I'm probably fine. I could probably just do that. And instead, I don't like cooking small meals, and Caitlin doesn't really get up before my day's about half over usually when she gets up, and she'll be like cooking breakfast, but it's like lunch. So I
Yeah.
won't eat before then, and then I'll have like a protein shake if I'm thinking about it. I'll do like afternoon coffee protein shake with like cold brew in it at like, I don't know, 3, and then I might eat 2 more small meals. But those are I'm like meal prepping those because I just don't want to go and cook.
Yeah.
I need to eat meat, right? Protein. And I'm like, I don't want to I don't want to get out of pan. But that stuff's just easier to just do a bunch all at once. Like I could eat the same ground beef and rice for that afternoon meal for the rest of my life and be fine. But I don't want to make it each time. You feel
So
me?
I went down this like deep rabbit hole on the reason I do it is not for weight or for a diet, it's for longevity.
Yeah, you're trying
Eh,
to live forever.
yes. Well, not live forever, but I'm trying to have a quality life for a long time. Like have 70s, 80s and maybe 90s be like I can walk. I think the goal for 90 is to not be confined to a home or a chair, but get around the
Mm,
house. The goal for 70s and 80s is to still be able to travel like overseas, walk
yeah.
around cities, that kind of stuff.
You want to be able to use all the money that you saved your whole life, right?
Yeah. Um and like you can't, and also, some of the stuff in that rabbit hole I went down was like um I always pronounce this word, but like Alzheimer's. They,
Alzheimer's?
I just call it old timers, which is probably
Yeah.
disrespectful, but like they're saying it's like a form of diabetes. And I think you can kind of go down a rabbit hole there where potentially it just has to do with sugar, basically. But
Yeah.
like the, and so cancer and all kinds of stuff. If you go down the rabbit hole of like the longevity, it has to do with what you're eating. And then the big part about it was that I'm not prepared to talk about is just like basically every time you eat, you're aging because it's causing your cells to multiply and divide. So every
Interesting. I
meal
remember
that you
yeah, you noted that, and I thought, well, that seems unavoidable. But like,
you
I
could
don't think
literally just eat.
humans, if you were to look at this like evolutionarily, and whatever anyone's beliefs are, let's just pretend they're those right now. Um, if you were thinking of us as like hunter gatherers, and you think about the stomach's response to eating, like you can eat a bunch really fast and you get full like 15 minutes in, regardless of how much you eat. But if you drink like a pint of water after you have 2 bites, then you can't finish your food. And so I think it kind of tracks with this idea that like you're just supposed to eat just like one massive meal a day, and then that's going to get you through. So I don't know. It makes sense. But then again, those people didn't live very long. So what do they know?
I sometimes I think that too. I'm like, well, the argument falls apart when we think about they all died at like 35. But
Yeah.
anyway, so the first thing I actually do want to get us back on track and talk about is you have recently launched a company called Fire Everybody. And it looks like you're wearing the
Yeah.
hat there. I am anxiously
Man.
awaiting my hat, but what's so cool and different about it is that it's not just the hat itself, it's the brand. And so I kind of want to hear, can you like talk about the hat, the
Mm.
brand, and just tell us a little bit
Yeah.
about it?
Yeah. It's the only reason I'm actually on here. We're just kind of pretending to still be friends. I really just am trying to plug my hat. But but Peter's a close friend of mine. I think Peter was one of your first episodes too. Um, and Peter has ideas that I think he's a little bit of a conspiracy theorist sometimes, but he's got ideas that he will
Love
put
that.
out into the ether, right? Then you're like, okay, that's a cool idea, but like, and then he'll bring it up, like every 6 months. And so he had said some stuff about Fire Everybody, a few times. I swear at first he just wanted to have like a website. I can't remember, but it was right before I took the bar, and he had called and was talking about it with me, and saying, that they had him and Christian I think actually just moved, but he was living on the coast in Washington, and they had actually talked to a factory already and had like a prototype hat made. And so the prototype hat was more of a, this is like a snapback flat bill, and the prototype, the first one that they had done, was more of a dad hat. And I love hats. I like literally always wear snapback hats, just because I didn't, my hair is kind of curly and I never really liked it until, it's funny, if your hair's curly as it starts to thin as you get older, it's actually like really good volumizer. But when I was younger, I hated it. So I always just wear hats. And so I don't know if he was initially just calling me to ask questions about hats, or just to be like, hey, do you think this idea is cool? Is the thing I'm doing? Or hey, we don't really know where we're going to go next. Would you like to be a part of this? And I just basically asked him, I was like, hey, are you asking if I want in on this? Because I mean, you've already done kind of the initial hard part, is finding a person who can make it.
Yeah.
Um, just because it's foreign to most people. Um, and on the other hand, I was like, hey, I had started this underwear line in college, and when I first moved, and so I knew a little bit about how to talk to manufacturers and how to approach some of the quality control things, but they never ended up needing any help with that. But like really quickly, I became very engaged with kind of the branding part of it. So
It's right up your alley because it's retail,
yeah,
accessory clothing, but also politics.
yeah, it's fascinating. So like you think of lawyer or law student and you think politics, and there is obviously there. I think most lawyers are politically inclined, and I would say most have a better, as a group, probably have a better understanding of what's going on in politics than any other group. But I actually, my undergrad degree was in political science, and I think that there's like a political science has kind of like, trees to it, and there's like political theory and like international relations, but there's also kind of like a science of how politics works, and how representative government can work, different types of of representation, and so I've always had like, I think I've always had like a finger on this idea of like, hey, what are the masses thinking, and why? Why does it appear that everyone hates politics? Is it because, just people are dicks, and people who care the most are the biggest dicks? Or is it because, politics are just, it's like bullshit. Like none of this, they're all the same choice. And that's something I've always said, like when people are arguing liberals, conservatives, I've always kind of promoted this idea that, sorry, I dropped my fidget spinner. I've always pushed this idea that like, hey, what's crazy is that they're basically the same on all the things that matter. Like defense budget, term limits, these aren't things that either party disagrees about. So we're arguing about like, they're important, but they're ancillary issues. And a large part of each party's platform, I think, ultimately social. They're not governmental. They're not structural issues. They're, hey, we're trying to see what people are the most angry about, not like, hey, have you guys thought about, how this could be different? So I'm in tune with Peter's idea, but I think I had probably thought about why this idea works on a slightly different level, not a deeper level, just a different way, because I had done some work in school, and read a lot about, kind of like why are people disinterested in politics? And we had we danced around some different catchphrases for stuff, right? Like at one point I think we said, let's talk about not talking about politics. But one that I felt kind of dear to me was, in terms of like a market, there is two sectors of people that are kind of like the platform for the party. Now, whether that's because both sides of the media tend to just appeal to people's fear interests, and they found a fear that aligned with theirs, or whether it's because they genuinely just support most of what that party supports. Those people are out. Well, they might not be. I don't know. Maybe the
When
AOC
you say
liberals
out, do you
and the.
mean not interested in the product, or what do you mean out?
I'm not trying to make a product for them.
Okay.
Now, I wouldn't. I mean, if they want to wear it, I think it's great. I think that you could say I support this candidate, and also fire everybody. But what I was trying to appeal to, and it's funny because Peter, myself, and Christian, I think all had slightly different. You know, we all saw slightly different value in it. But what I saw was everybody watches the Super Bowl, and only two of the 32 people at the Super Bowl party are there to watch their teams. The other 30 are there to watch the commercials. And so I want a hat for the people who came to watch the commercials. I want a hat for the people because I actually think that that group's larger.
That's a cool line.
Yeah, and it's not, it's probably not that exact fraction, but I think it is. I think it is a silent majority that is thinking, man, I'm really voting against someone, or I'm really just trying to pick the best of two things that I don't think are good. And so I wanted there to be a way for them to say, this is my participation in this discourse.
Yeah.
This is a bullshit choice. There, I said something. And I thought, the Trump campaign and the hats was making like political candidacy, political fandom, which is kind of a problem in its own right. And then beyond that, apparel to show that, I thought, oh my God, this is brilliant. Because like people will wear a hat to say, hey, I know something about this. I have a stance on this. Even especially if it's kind of like a jab at humor, or if it's a kind of like a counter culture thing. And so I thought hats might be the perfect thing. And like, so Peter and Christian had done like 80% of the legwork on the idea part. And I think I understand maybe some of the mechanics easier. And honestly, the three of us have a very good dynamic in that I'm probably a little bit of an airhead sometimes. And I'm probably a little bit, procrastinating and whatever. And Peter's very direct and very organized. And I think Christian actually sees things kind of from a different, like, structural logistical level that, I don't want to think about. Right. So it's a good little tripod. It's going to take some work to get it out there, but, and honestly, like getting a hat made this way with this down the bill red and blue was just
Yeah.
apparently a lot harder than I thought. And then I thought, I don't think I've really ever seen any hats like that. They're all, if anything, they're split on the cap, not the bill. So
Right.
it's
And
cool that
usually
it's
the
like,
bill is a
yeah,
solid.
usually the bill is just one, it's just one sheet with stitching, but people stop us all the time and are like, oh my God, I love that hat. And we're like, it's ours. Go to our website. Honestly, we just got the website up and going. We really just got the hats like 3 weeks ago. But yeah, dude, it's kind of fun. It's like right up my alley, and now I have some time to work on it. Part of this, people imagine you make a brand and it's an internet brand, and people just go to your website and buy it, and all you got to do is post on your Instagram, and people will just hand you their money. But the reality is, you don't really know what your demographic is until you figure out who's buying it from you, and you have to do that in person. So we've had a couple ideas, and I think we're going to start just kind of like going to baseball games and stuff and trying to just talk to people. I was like, we should just go to these like car shows. It's
Yeah.
honestly kind of like, it does feel like it's men primarily. And I think one of the parts I didn't really think about is that's the hat style. So the girl who was taking our photos, Grace actually was like, we had the prototype too. And she's like, I really like that. I'd buy that. And I'm like, oh my God, we got to make dad hats too. Cause the girls want dad hats, but it makes sense. Their heads are like a little smaller on average, and they want it to frame their face differently. And I thought, okay, well, we just got to have two. And I think you had asked something along the lines of, other product lines. And I think part of a problem that you might get to when you have a brand like this is trying to make it appeal to everybody, when in reality you could just take the people it appeals to the most and give them another way to be appealed to. So maybe we need tank tops, maybe we need shorts. But for now, this was a relatively low barrier to entry. We still got to kind of
Yes.
iron out what our approach is going to be. And then if we need to throw in t-shirts or socks or, whatever, like, I'm happy to make it. I think I actually like the idea of having a textile fashion brand a lot, just because it's kind of fun. You can make it whatever you want, but
Oh, I'm so
I,
into it.
I don't want it to be necessarily shoehorned into politics forever. Obviously, we've got an election here that is an opportunity to people are more open to being talked to about it. But I think fire everybody could mean a lot of things. It could be like the next. I mean, so okay, boomer was like a little dismissive movement statement for a while, and it was intentionally directed at like telling boomers that they're just bitching about getting off my lawn. um, but it kind of developed into like almost like a neg statement that you would just say to people,
Yeah,
and
it
I'm like,
became a big thing.
that could be cool, right? You never know where it's going to go, but
Yeah.
put a little money in it, and if it doesn't work, you got hats for life, so whatever.
Dude, this is so cool. Going back to the very beginning, when you were talking about what fire everybody could mean, I think on a very simple term, what some people might think is it's a red and blue hat. You're saying fire everybody. And I think you guys have a deeper meaning, but somebody that's not into politics, which sounds like you're kind of trying to target those people somewhat.
It's weird. I'm trying to target people who are the opposite of me,
Right. But
right?
they are going to first think of Trump versus Biden. And it's a red and a blue
Yeah.
hat, and it's kind of accepted that like those aren't the best candidates that either party could probably come up with. So it's like just fire them both. Let's get somebody new. Can we not come up with better representation? And so I think that's an obvious thing that people can get behind too, even though you think so much deeper about it.
It's pretty fascinating because there are inherent issues with the way our political system is structured, as I think what they call in political science first past the post voting, which doesn't necessarily mean a majority, but you need a plurality that is controlling, and then add to that parties and primary systems, where you get primary systems that inherently select polarized extreme candidates. Although Biden is probably not the as far left as I think you would have expected out of the last couple of elections, um, compared to, like, I don't know, Bernie Sanders or Elizabeth Warren, for example. And then they get to the general election, and so you basically have two people that like nobody wants, because the primaries pushed us to that. And there are other so I don't know, on some level maybe it could be a conversation starter about that, but there are other systems that we could use, like ranked choice, where you take the 10 candidates and you rank them in order of which you'd like, and they get points 10 to 1 based off of how you rank them, and then whoever has the most points at the end is the winner. Or I think the way that's supposed to work is you like remove whoever's lowest each time. But like, we're not dancing around that. That's not what we have. We just have two people that no one's excited about, and I have no idea why that's a good idea. And I wanted people who feel that on a deep level and are annoyed by people who are excited about these two horribly geriatric presidential candidates. That you know, this is your way to say maybe you're both wrong. Although I don't like I tend to, I probably am a little left leaning. I'm sure. What's that statement? If people on the right think you're left and people on the left think you're right, you're probably doing something right. But I'm probably a little to the left, and so I don't like the idea of saying both sides. But I do like the idea of saying, hey, I didn't choose either of you.
Right. Yeah, and
You know?
everybody has their own little explanation. It's like, well, I couldn't vote for Hillary because of whatever, Benghazi or whatever it is. And I really
and
couldn't vote for
gossip
Trump, so I chose
because
not to
then
vote at all, or I voted for somebody, you know, the other
yeah.
party or whatever, like, or sometimes people will say, "Well, I voted for Hillary, but really I just had to vote and I just
Hmm.
couldn't vote for Trump." And they don't really want Hillary and they don't feel good about it, you know?
It's really problematic because we have just wholesale problems with voter turnout. I think it's something like 60% of eligible adults vote. Although maybe I might be saying that wrong. I think it's like 70, like 80 million people voted for Biden this last election, or maybe it was 80 million people voted total. I can't recall, but we have low turnout, right? And part of the issue is, I mean, everyone thought Hillary was going to win. It's just that no one was excited about Hillary.
No.
Nobody. Maybe, I mean, she's an establishment politician, and whatever you, I don't know. I mean, I don't think the majority of people are voting off of policy regardless. But like, maybe if we had some people that people were excited about, we might get better turnout. Maybe if we had a parliamentary system where they kind of inherently had to work together, we'd have better turnout. This dog takes my hoodie and like always nests in it. It's the funniest thing. Um, like, man, I don't even know who. Like, I thought people were excited about Bernie. I thought Bernie Trump would have been really, really fascinating because they are polar opposites. They're both kind of populist candidates, meaning they're like saying the quiet part out loud. Although Trump is more of a populist candidate, um, and I just think it would have been interesting. But we didn't get that. We got Hillary, and then we got Biden, and they're two very entrenched career politicians. Which, I think there's this sense that people had that they just, after Trump, wanted an adult in the room, and so then you got Biden, who was like very predictable and very not crazy, I guess is how he appears. Although I know people think that he's a puppet or has dementia, or whatever. Whatever your cherry picked news source is, you could form an opinion about either of those. But yeah, I don't know. We missed a window there to have something really exciting with two crazy extreme candidates. I don't know what's going to happen with this current one. And I know
Do you,
I know you wanted to talk about politics as well. We could always come back to the hat thing, but like I've never been more kind of confused than I am about what's happening than I am right now with this election.
well, I'm curious. I don't follow the Trump trial, and I really kind of part of the reason I don't follow it is there's probably a term for it, but I just think that it's irrelevant because I think you've told me it's not. But my not knowing enough about it makes
Define
me feel
irrelevant.
like, well, if he loses, can't he just still win the presidency and forgive himself? And all the people that are going to vote for him, do they care
Mm.
whether how his trial goes? I mean, part of me
Probably
thinks
not.
there's a conspiracy like no matter what, he's just still going to get president. And so
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's probably. I don't know that the most recent New York conviction is going to affect things, although his sentencing hasn't occurred yet, as far as I know. I follow all this stuff, right? Like I'm in the subreddits, law, politics, liberal, conservative, all of it, and it just gets to be constant headlines. So it's kind of hard to like take a big interest in it. I do find that what I get in some of the legal subreddits to be a little more punctuated in terms of what I think matters, but I think that stuff matters more, right? Like what did the Supreme Court decide to do about this? And these are state level crimes that he was convicted of, so he can't pardon himself. Um, but I mean, obviously, this is uncharted water. I don't know that they could incarcerate him. I don't know that you can serve from state prison. I think they would have to commute it somehow, and then he would be able to serve the rest of it when he got out, which that could be probably pretty problematic since at least once he has appeared to not really want to leave. But but I don't know. And also like my understanding of the crimes in this situation, and we could get into it. I don't think it matters a ton. I think it does matter that, you know, this isn't a hush money trial. This is a violation of election law trial, and because the hush money was paid in violation. That is the thing he did that violated election law, campaign finance law. But so it does matter. I just it's a first time offender. It's probably going to be just probation. I don't think anything's coming of that in terms of him going to jail. But you know, there are several other trials coming up. I believe Georgia, for instance, that is directly related to, you know, more serious crimes, alleged crimes. I don't know.
I feel
I
like
do
Trump
try
is
to
the
just like
perfect
once a
name
month. Yeah, yeah,
because it's like he's
it's
Trump
interesting.
and he just trumps all of, like, files bankruptcy. Like he's Trump, so he just trumps it, and he still has money, and he's gonna trump the legal system and just get president. Like
Yeah.
it's
So
it's
I think the phenomenon of this populist candidate is kind of that. It's the cancel culture and it's the cancel culture, and I think some people probably felt, men in particular, probably felt that, you know, Me Too branched into uh, some ancillary issues, but that weren't necessarily a power issue in the same way. Um, and men maybe felt like, men and probably people on the right, you know, it's just this conservative, traditional, not necessarily in a political sense, but in a we don't want things to change sense, even though there's those meanings are sort of the same. Uh, Thinking all these people telling me I need to be X, Y, and Z way are bullshit, and I'm so tired of being told that I'm wrong and that I caused this and X, Y, and Z. And so when some guy comes along and he says, "Yeah, it is all bullshit," and and like he's saying what they want to hear, of course, like, you know, he also has a history of saying this is all bullshit when it's definitely not. Like this is it does appear like most of these ancillary enterprises that he's established over the years were sort of like fraudulent, and I think he has this appeal as being like a very successful businessman, which is you know, probably in part warranted depending on how you think of what successful business is. So like I found the previous case in New York much more interesting. That was the was it Deutsche Bank? I can't remember. But he had essentially, I'm going to butcher this somehow. He had essentially undervalued his property for tax purposes and then overvalued his property for collateral purposes. And and that's fraud. And I've had several people in my life who are very educated, not necessarily about law, tell me that that's how things are done, and they're wrong. That is not how things are done. The statute very clearly, because I remember listening to a podcast where they read the statute and they were like, this is fraud. And it was knowingly that he had done it. And so then it became this question of like, yeah, but that's a victimless crime. And because he paid it back, right? I think, I don't know. But it's not, because that's not how interest rates are calculated wholesale. Like if one person gets one that they don't deserve, everyone else is paying higher. Ask the actuaries. They don't just say, well, he paid it back, so everyone else is the same as they always would have been. Like, and it's just amazing to me that you see this like real estate bubble kind of again, and inflation as a and inflation and I would just say like economic pain as a result of what we think are maybe problematic interest rates from the Fed. And those same people who are like, see, Biden did this and can remember 2008 will simultaneously be like, yeah, the Trump's doing what they all do. This is how business is done. I'm like, well, you can't.
Yeah.
They're all the same. Like, we have to prosecute fraud in America more than we do, because at the highest level, it affects the most people. Like, I mean, I've also heard this promoted quite a bit, that this Biden is weaponizing the IRS and he's going after all of these. Yeah, please do. I'd like everyone to pay their taxes. Now, I don't think, maybe I think taxes are too high, but it's kind of bullshit that like only the rich people get to like structure their way out of it, right? And
Yeah, it is.
I'd really like to see people see him for what he is in that context. So is he a successful business person? I mean, sure, if you think all successful businesses are, kind of bending the rules, maybe they are. I don't know that I want ExxonMobil running the country either.
Right.
So, so I don't know, but that's the dynamic. I thought that was very telling, because I was like, this is clearly an insight into a lot of his businesses are like kind of disingenuously leveraged and collateralized, and then leveraged and collateralized, and then like it does appear like he doesn't have as much liquidity as he claimed he did, because he couldn't pay that judgment, or it appeared he couldn't up until like the 11th hour. And so then you have this cross dynamic that's occurred, where people are like, that's just like they're just picking on him. That's just your news source. And so now it's the fake news phenomenon, which is it's an attempt to fight facts with devaluing the classification of what a fact is, to the point where there are no facts. And the same group of people who are saying facts don't care about your feelings are also saying there are no facts. So I don't know. I think that there's a divide that he's accelerated quite a bit. I don't know where it's headed. I actually think we could talk about this for like 3 hours. I could talk about this for 3 hours.
Well, I mean, I could too.
Yeah, and because it's, you pay
It's very
attention
easy.
to it, and then we have. I know you and I both have, but based off of where we grew up and where we live, a diversity of political views in our spheres, and so you hear all of it. I don't just hear. I'm not in an echo chamber. And so sometimes I'm like, I see what I'm seeing and I see what everyone's saying, and I'm like, do you hear yourself? Where'd you get this?
I can't figure out what the people that live around me think,
You're
because
well, you're kind of, you've got
I'm in
like
a very
100 yards
unique
from house
spot.
to house.
Well, because I'm in Washington, I think Washington's a blue state. I think because of Seattle, and Seattle being such a strong. My grandpa said such a strong blue city, and so I don't know if that's true, but I think that's how I view it. But I'm on the Olympic Peninsula, which is
Yeah, you're like
very
outside of
rural.
Seattle.
Yeah, I mean, it's across the sound. You have to
Hmm.
take a ferry or drive like 2 hours to get to Seattle. And it's nothing
Wow.
but small cities out here. The biggest city is like 18,000 people. So, and there's a bunch of small cities. And then like 90% of the peninsula is Olympic National Park. And there's a rainforest in the center of it and a bunch of mountains. And then just all these little rural pop up cities. But it's very, like, there's gun shops everywhere, like
Yeah,
huge, but get your guns here. But then right next door is a weed store, like get your weed,
yeah.
because it's legal in
I thought it was
Washington.
amazing because I visited like a year before you moved for the
Okay.
first time, and I was like, I mean, it's what people think Colorado is, but its left part is a lot more left. Like Seattle, to me, I was like, holy shit, this is San Francisco,
Yeah.
like Seattle
Very.
proper.
Yeah.
But it actually feels a little more right when you get out of the city than I thought Colorado did. It's pretty fascinating polarization. I think it's what people think Austin and Texas is like, but I really don't.
That's how I come across. That's how I think of
Really?
Texas. Yeah.
Okay.
I always think Austin's blue, like Seattle, but all of Texas is red.
Yeah, but you also have these like blue correlated things. that are statewide, like marijuana is legal in the whole state, right?
Of Texas?
Of Washington,
Of Washington. Yeah, okay.
right? Stuff like that that isn't necessarily curtailed to the city. I mean, honestly, this affects me personally now, where I'm seeing this stuff in Texas, and you have like this like Greg Abbott, Ken Paxton Republican war against Austin, which has kind of been going on for a while. And I'm kind of like, you clearly have an area of people that want things to be a certain way, and you claim to care about like localized freedom. And then, you just really feel like you have to go tell people you disagree with to shut the fuck up and do what you say. And that hypocrisy has never been lost on me. I've seen it and heard it my whole life. And like, it feels like it's half of the Republican platform is freedom, except you can't do any of the things you want to do. Like, well, that's not at all. That doesn't feel more free. I don't know.
Okay.
But yeah,
I'm curious
go ahead.
about we had a conversation like a month ago and I said something like I'm not a political person or I'm a lay person or I'm not into politics and you said no, you kind of are or you said you are and you said, a lot of things or everything can be derivative of politics, like it's all related to politics. So kind of I think I'm somebody that with your hat, I like the
Hmm.
hat because I think it looks really cool. I like the red and blue, so it attracts me right at first. It just looks like a nice hat. But then when I get the branding behind it, I'm like, oh, this is a message that I can get behind because
Yeah.
I don't feel it. I don't like either party. I don't feel an attraction towards Republicans or Democrats or Trump or Biden or Hillary. It's like I just feel like there's got to be a better person that could be the candidate that's put forward. We have two parties. Can we not come up? I mean, there's got to be some of the best, brightest people in our whole country that are super into politics. Usually they have a legal background. They're just smart people. How can we not find somebody that represents the people better? Probably somebody that's like 45 years old,
Yeah.
like, and so I'm
Yeah.
like,
Can
the
we maybe
hat.
get like not a boomer for the 11th election in a row?
Yeah, I
Like
mean,
it's three of the last four presidents were born within like 3 years of each other.
yeah, and I wasn't into politics back then either, but looking back, Obama feels like somebody that's well spoken and at least kind of understood what he was talking about.
Yeah.
I
Yeah. A
mean, I
liberal
don't know
snake.
if Biden has dementia, but he doesn't come across. You see all these little 10-second videos of Biden that are put out there. It looks real bad, and you can't make.
I don't really know, man. I've seen the videos. Some close friends of mine like to show them to me. And I'm also aware that he's got a history of a slight speech impediment, and he's just old, right? Like, I don't think old people speak as snappily, and in my experience. Um, but I've seen very recent videos of him speaking very articulately about things that are relatively complicated and then responding to people. So like the State of the
Okay.
Union address was great and people were like, yeah, but he's reading off a teleprompter. And then I've also seen a White House press conference recently where he sounded the exact same way. And so to some extent, sure, maybe there's enough support there that he doesn't have to think, but I don't think that you could fight through dementia to do that. And I've also heard Trump kind of like ramble into non-answers about similar things, and I don't know that he's had any circumstances where he's not also in front of a teleprompter. So it does feel like cherry picked attention because Biden seems like a creepy old uncle to a certain extent. So it's kind of like, he's too old for this. Like, I genuinely feel like they're probably both too old. Like, how much, setting aside that the reality is that like that echelon of wealth probably can't relate to you anyway. But how much can two 80-year-old men relate to problems that will face this country in the next 10 years, that will
Yeah,
face
not.
me in the next 10 years? How much? Any of it? Like,
So does
so
that represent your hat's thought that we should find better representation?
I think if there's anything that I want to be the takeaway from people with the hat brand, it's that, even if your stance is I can't support people pretending that this is a choice, that is a stance. And I just, I kind of wanted there to be a platform for those people. Honestly, I just want to go into parties and have people not be upset that I want to talk about politics. So this is my avenue to attempt to create that. But we'll see. I don't know. I think people are scared of it in a variety of ways. I think more people than I originally expected already have a stance, but they don't want they don't want to be like outed. I think that's probably true for some Trump supporters, at least kind of like where I am. I sort of felt that way in law school. That it was law school is probably disproportionately left leaning, and so you'd have like the Federalist Society group, which was like 10 people of your class or something like that. It might be more, who are kind of like outwardly very conservative. But then I know there were more people who are conservative. They just don't really talk about it because it's unpopular in that setting. And I think the same is probably true to some extent about like, liberals in a place like Nebraska. So those people are maybe not the right market either. And then you have people who I think are like, I don't want to project anything about politics because I really just don't. I don't want it to be a thing, which, kind of inherently implies that there are people who are just somehow, that's what they mean when they say privilege. They're like, oh, so you don't have to worry about the problems that everyone else has to worry about. But I don't know. The polling is suggesting that Trump's either a wash or a favorite now, which is interesting. On one hand, it does look like, I just feel like polling is broken at this point. It was 538. I was just the biggest fan of, which is Nate Silver's like political forecasting company that he created a long time ago, and it had like correctly predicted like all of the districts or something. And I don't know. He was very very on for a while, and he had even projected, he had given Trump a higher likelihood of victory over Hillary than just about anyone else. And then he got a lot of stuff wrong in the last election for the Senate. I don't know a percentage, but it was like a 2% chance the Democrats retain the Senate, and they did. And then some of the stuff he had been project. Basically, what I think is the issue with polling at this point is they keep saying this is going to go this way, and then all of these special elections, basically everything since this Roe decision was overturned, has been like, oh, surprise, Democrat win. Oh, surprise, Democrat win. Like state house races in Alabama and other conservative states. And I'm kind of like, yeah, it really does seem like a certain group of people is very motivated to vote. And I don't know that that's the case. Like these are not nationally representative examples, but it does seem like there's a polling error favoring the right. And then there's just institutional issues with polling in general. Like, I don't think people respond as much to any polling efforts, phone or otherwise, as they used to, because there's just so much bullshit telemarketing fraud that
Yeah.
like nobody's answering random phone calls anymore. I'm not doing a survey at the end of this call. Like none of that. I don't
Right.
know. Pay me and I'll tell you what I think. So I don't know who's giving them their opinions. But I know that in the last 2 years, they've gotten a lot of them wrong based off of who they're getting it from. So I don't know what to think, but it does look like it's going to be very close. It does look like it's going to come down to like two states. Right. The last I checked, it was like Pennsylvania has like a 15% chance of being the deciding state or the closest state. Realistically, there's only ever like 8 that are like in play. I was telling everybody here that I thought Texas might be closer because it really does seem like people hate Greg Abbott and Ted Cruz for a variety of reasons. Although a lot of people just hate Democrats. So, you've got a split there. But like the city population, the city portion of the population in Texas grows every year. It's like Houston, Dallas, San Antonio, Texas, and El Paso keep
Austin,
making
El
up a larger
Paso.
chunk. Yeah. Well, did I not say Austin?
You said
And
Texas.
Austin. Yeah. Well, yeah. That Freudian slip. They make up Houston alone, Harris County alone is like 3.4 million people. The state,
Yeah,
I think, has 27. Does that
it
sound right?
is weird to me how they say that the whole state is Republican, but all those big cities have to be very liberal. I guess.
Fort Worth is pretty conservative.
Oh yeah, that
It's like
makes
the
sense.
largest metropolitan conservative city in America.
That makes sense.
Which, yeah, I mean, yeah, Fort Worth was like the stockyard headquarter of Texas for a while. I mean, regardless, it doesn't matter why it is. But my point is, the margin the last like six election cycles has gotten closer and closer. I think with like one deviation. So I've been saying, hey, I think this is potentially in play. Beto O'Rourke seemed to have a lot of like popularity, and then he came out and said like we want to take everyone's guns after the shooting in El Paso, and I think that's a bit of a non-starter. It seems like this for Texas voters. It seems like this Eric Allred guy has a little more of a centrist platform. He's like a former NFL player, lawyer, some other stuff. Um, at the end of the day, there's a lot of people here who would never vote for those baby killing socialist Democrats. So I just don't know, who's going to go out and vote, how many people, what's the actual split on what people think at this point in time versus 4 years ago. But Texas would be a pretty interesting swing state. I think it's been since like 1980 that it has gone blue. So
I didn't. Texas used to vote blue. I didn't know that.
I think I had read that they had. I mean, honestly, it's hard to track the history of the parties. Even people like to say that the post Civil War era, the parties kind of flipped a little, and the way that the South was courted by the political parties kind of shifted over time. But I think it is fair to say that the Democrats were conservative pre-Civil War, and after like 1930, if I probably have the dates wrong, the Republicans were conservative, which it's conservative liberal is really the viewpoints. So,
Right. Yeah.
but yeah, my understanding is they have at least once before. Um, I just, I don't know. It's going to be interesting. I do think if I can, my capstone political issue, right, is obviously you see the results of this with the abortion decision, and I think you're going to see it with some other decisions that do appear a little bit questionable, and that's going to motivate people. But the Supreme Court is like easily as partisan as it has ever been, with Samuel Alito going as far as to say we have to win the war against the left, paraphrasing the other day. So I guess if there were anything, I wish that the nuance of the role that the court plays over time was a little easier for people to grasp, because they're not voting for justices; they're voting for a president, and many of them are voting against the other candidate. But what they're really doing is voting for a guy who could potentially pick a third of the court lifetime appointments, and then they could just be like, "Well, we changed our mind about precedent and it doesn't apply. We threw these cases out," and it does kind of just appear like they're going down their checklist of things they want to get rid of, which is not how law works here, or it's not how it used to. I guess it works that way now. And so I wish people would pay attention to that, like, because I said to a lot of people, I'm like, they're totally going to throw Roe out. And they were like, no, they won't. And they did, like, immediately. So, I don't know what's next. Maybe it's birth control. But like, and I don't even care like what your opinion is about those things, but like that's really what you're voting for. That will affect your life potentially more than anything else.
Are you saying this because I think that there's some assumed things that I'm not aware of? So like, are you saying that the next president is going to pick potentially 3 Supreme Court justices because 3 are about to retire or something?
I mean, I think it's like Sotomayor and maybe Roberts are both kind of old. I think Roberts might only be like 69. I can't remember. But I would be blown away if Trump won and one of the conservative justices didn't retire, so he could appoint another 45-year-old uh, conservative legal scholar. And I don't know. It's hard to project when people are going to die, but like, it doesn't seem like anybody's about to die. Like Ginsburg was like 90, right? Um, but I'm just saying that that's what's in play. Although I
Like if
guess
it,
when the Democrats have a candidacy open, the Republicans just say, "Nope, we're not voting." So maybe not. Maybe there's no way for the Democrats to appoint anybody. I don't know. But I think the Supreme Court matters a lot. And
dude, I mean, I'd probably for another time, but I feel like we could talk for a whole podcast on the Supreme Court because I don't think people understand it as well as you do, or I don't
well, I
think it's
hope
common
not.
knowledge.
I
Like,
also don't think I'm an expert, right? But I have a law degree. But like, I hope I understand something. I don't know how to convey it. Maybe you could help me with that. Like,
well, you can
what's the
name
thing that
off
stands out?
5 or 6, maybe all 9 of them by name and which party they are and who's the head of it. And I don't know any of that stuff. So I
Oh,
don't,
well, yeah, I can totally do that. But
I
I've
don't
read.
know.
I mean, I've read stuff that they wrote. Like I had to for school, and I I don't do it for fun. But yeah, I don't know. There's a lot of history there that I think would explain how power in America really works. Uh, if you could go read a constitutional law textbook, it would teach you a lot about how things aren't that different than they used to be. I think can't remember who I was talking to about whether racism still exists, and um, I mean, racism is a subset of bigotry, and bigotry is never going anywhere. So of course it does. But I think my point was something along the lines of, reading a con law textbook, which is sort of taught historically. The thing that stood out to me wasn't so much the unbelievably like bizarre things that the brightest legal mind in 1880 put in paper in a court opinion. It was how in 1940 they were saying the same shit. And you act like this just went away because we fought a war, and like the smartest people in the country were still saying the same things like 60 years later. So, but yeah, it does suck to read it all. Maybe you just read the abbreviations.
What
Anyways,
is, yeah.
what?
Well, when you say read the
You
abbreviation,
could you could read case briefs, which are like summaries of what's happening in a case and what the takeaway was, and kind of understand. Although my point was really about they give you all this like background theory, about like how the phrase in the Constitution, natural born citizen, doesn't mean black people born here. Like, you need to read that case to understand the people that you're dealing with. They're saying the words don't mean what the words mean because the words never mattered. It's all about power. And I think that's just kind of always been the reality. So you just always have this fight over like progress, keeping things the same, and it's kind of the beauty of the American political system, in a sense, right, is that it moves slowly and carefully, and it's also like critical that we don't ever allow ourselves to just stop, overrule all the laws that we pass, and go backwards. Like it's a central tenet of um, the efficacy of law in America is that we respect. It's called stare decisis, the Latin term for it, but we respect previous decisions of the highest courts down hierarchically. And so when the Supreme Court goes, yeah, we think this one was wrong, change it, it's problematic because now it means none of this is ever safe. Whatever you decide, they'll just change later. And like their integrity is gone. And I'm not saying their integrity as people, but like their integrity as a self supporting system of respect for itself is gone. Like now, none of it's all out, right? Do whatever you want, change it, vote these guys in, they'll just change it, right? Like it's problematic. I don't know. I also live in a place where like it feels like Austin's been kind of like a hot topic for politics and whatnot lately with the like UT protests and everything. So I don't know. Think about it all the time.
I
But
love that you do. I love talking to you about it. I do think that a lot of people that buy the hat are not going to be as educated as someone like you on these topics, which is
I mean, if
perfect.
anything, if I could distill the hat feeling I want them to have, is this like, hey, you guys didn't give me a choice. Like you didn't give me a choice that's good. That's bullshit. Like I want them to have that hat to wear. Or better yet, like when they're at this party and there's this guy with the Trump hat and then there's this guy with like a Roe t-shirt on and they're going back and forth. This guy could be like, well, I think both your ideas are stupid. Right? I want to give people a platform to talk about politics without having to like religiously follow one candidate. So I don't know that it will do that, but that was my hope.
I do think it's like a safe conversation icebreaker starter,
Yeah,
It's like if I'm wearing that hat and I go out, somebody's like, dude, that's a cool hat. Even if I don't know a
it's
lot.
weird. People do. I think people are like, that's funny when they stop me, and I would think it's funny. So I don't know if they think it's funny for the same reason, but it's a statement. I think actually our website says this hat is not a movement; it's a snapback to spotlight the bullshit. Which
Yeah,
I was like,
that's
Peter and I
perfect.
worked on that for a while, and I was like, yeah, that's exactly the feeling I wanted to convey.
Super cool.
A snapback to spotlight the bullshit. But yeah, I like this like annual meetup with Trevor, political update where we just go through the make the rounds.
Oh yeah, last time it was all Capitol riots and Trump taking classified
Yeah,
documents.
yeah. God, that feels so long ago.
Yeah, I mean,
I
who
guess it.
cares
I
about
guess it
those
was.
things now?
Yeah, dude.
um, I do want to kind of switch to AI, crypto, computer science. I mean, we could really
Oh
talk about
man.
any of it. I know you built a computer from scratch. Um, I know you are like
Yeah.
super into crypto. So
Oh,
what
don't
are
say
you
that.
interested
I
in?
don't. I'm not super into crypto. Don't put me out there like some crypto bro. Um,
I don't know.
I I do think okay.
Well,
There, these
I
are
want
real.
to say real quick that Maxwell is not a crypto bro because that that
Here,
would
wait,
not
I got it.
be an accurate representation. But
Ugh,
you have read books on how it
crypto
works.
bro.
Yeah, like you, perfect. Um, but you do understand like a ton about it. You're not just like a guy that's like, get me some Dogecoin. Like you understand everything top to
Yeah.
bottom on how it works, the
No,
platforms,
no,
and
not top to bottom. Get out of here. I understand a little bit, and the real reason is because uh, I got an internship in law school at a cryptocurrency for a semester. That's like, I mean, I thought it was interesting already, but like I hadn't gotten a ton of exposure to it until then. And that's when I started to pay a lot of attention to, well, there's a legal side to the regulation of it. Are they securities or not? And so that's where I was learning, but also, kind of like what happened to this market, and the fluctuations of the value of Bitcoin are huge. And I think there's some relatively predictable stuff. Um, and so there's a part of me that's like, God, it's eventually going to go back up. You should just buy up a bunch of Bitcoin and wait 4 years. Like that's done it like 5 times now. It does seem like it's not going anywhere now that there's some institutional uh, exchange traded funds that have Bitcoin. I don't even know what they're calling them, but that's related to AI really, and maybe just like the market as a whole with NVIDIA, because not all of them, not all crypto, but Bitcoin originally, at least before they started building these like purpose-built miners, people were going through this mining craze where they would buy graphic GPUs, graphical processing units, and run their computer with them. And basically, it's doing like these complex cryptographic guesses at the rate of its hash, and then you're hoping you get it right, and then you get a block reward, which is how the blockchain will sustain itself. Is it can process this and add these to the block with, the Bitcoin methodology is all these different nodes come to the same conclusion of this mathematical question. I can't remember exactly what it is. It's like two prime numbers multiplied. That it's the type of question where they can all get the same answer, but without knowing. You can give them the same input, and if their output is the same, the only way they got that output is by legitimizing the same pieces. So then you have consensus, right? And so like there was this huge phase for that, and it's gone back and forth a couple times. And then AI, it's honestly like Peter's a better person to explain this stuff, but the processing of a graphical processing unit works is a bunch of small processors essentially rather than one large processor, uh, like a CPU, like your computer processor. And because large language models are really like, if you could think of a word, if I'm talking to you and I have a word and then I add another word and then I add another word, so I have a 3-word sentence. Each word is exponentially making the sentence more complicated as they grow. And then when you factor in things like context and tone and, I don't know, like expectations, and then you imagine that the meaning of those things is like a matrix of data, and maybe even just like ones and zeros as representations of those things, then it makes sense that because a GPU is getting to its crypto hash guess results by making a ton of guesses as fast as it can, that the same type of processing unit would be able to uh, perform what you need these LLMs, large language models, to do. So LLMs, AI, as we think of generative AI, like ChatGPT, is working that way. And it's why there's a limit to how far it can talk to you, because it's growing in its compute usage so much so fast with each word. But enough of that. I mean, I did build a computer because I wanted to. I really think this stuff's the future, and I have started taking some classes on AI, and I thought I'm going to build this computer, get it to do some stuff that I can't get ChatGPT to do, because you can kind of control the system, and you don't have to worry about your data being used. I haven't really done much. I mean, the the parts are very expensive, so I have a 4090 on this computer, and I have a plan to get another one. And they're like a 4090 is like a $2,000 graphic card, but it can do it can do some of the stuff. It's not going to be able to do quite the same things as ChatGPT, but it can kind of do more targeted things better and faster. Um, but all of this to say that I think people thought this was going to be like a phase, and I really feel like this technology, well, it's going to look different than it does right now, but this is going to change the way that we think about work product and content a lot. And I don't think there's any going back.
I think you're right. Um, at my
Like I,
conferences for my regular job, AI is like always a topic.
it's
And one
like
of the
the topic
conferences,
now.
yeah.
People just add the word AI to fucking everything, and I'm like, they're like with AI, and I'm like, I don't think my toaster needs AI.
Yeah. And I do think that, um, okay, so like I had a conference in January. There was 4 general sessions, and then the rest are small breakout ones. But it was a 2.5 day conference. 2 of the 4 topics were sort of related to AI, and the other 2 were like human
Damn, half of
resource.
them.
Yeah, and like, um, and then we have new vendors popping up, like 3 of them. They're AI companies, and I'm in. I don't want to go too far into it, but like a certain space and with retirement, I'll say with pension products. And so these AI companies are popping up, and they basically just take data specific to this industry, and then they offer a service. Like, we have to put large amounts of data onto different softwares that are
Yeah.
from a long time ago, and it requires a lot of manual entry. And new systems have come up over the years, and it's like, okay, you use this. How do we get them to talk to each other? And these companies are popping up like, oh, we can integrate our systems. They call them APIs, I think, and
Hmm.
then we'll give you this output, and we call it AI, and maybe it is,
Yeah,
but
they're like all just using ChatGPT. It's so
yeah,
OpenAI is the company that has created GPT. Oh, what are we on now? We're on 4, and then they came out with another one called like 4.0 recently that's not quite as good, but it's faster at certain things. And 4 was the big one that was like, oh my God, the reasoning that it would give you for why the answer is this was way, way better. And then I think I mentioned earlier that I use Claude more because Claude, the context window is basically how much text. And so I think GPT-4 was like 32,000 tokens and Claude's was like 300,000 tokens. So if I wanted it to read like a 300-page document and tell me certain things, I could get it to do that. And ChatGPT wouldn't really, it would basically just start skipping parts. And even there, that can be kind of risky too. You kind of, yeah, you have to sort of know what's in the thing that you're asking, but you just, and then ask it for citations and it will give it to you and then you can check. But
yeah. And you're
but
using,
these, what I'm saying, and I'll hand it back to you, is the API GPT-4 has a chat interface that you can pay $20 to use. But when you're paying a company for a service and they're giving you an API, that API is directing to GPT. So there's not that many of them. This is what I'm getting at. Like
yeah,
all these startups are just like, they basically built a code to interact with it and then spit an output to you. And I think a lot of it's kind of like, I think a lot of it's kind of like the same. I'm like, I think you could make ChatGPT
but
do this
then
for you.
there are other ones that are like related to graphics, right? Because
Hmm.
pictures, now, is that different than Chat GPT? Is that like a totally different type of AI? I used one, for example, for my LinkedIn picture. So if you go out and look at it, that's not a real picture. I paid like
Wow.
$5,
What a
got an
fraud.
app on my phone, sent it like 5 pictures of me, and then it gave me this picture, and I was like, "Yep, this is my new LinkedIn picture." And then I deleted the app. You know?
Yeah. Yeah. So the computational process, I think, works roughly the same. Although, yeah, I have not engaged with. this as much. And ChatGPT, for instance, has like offshoots where you can get it to create stuff like that for you. Um,
Keaton is super into this. He like
really,
develops logos for people, or I don't know if he sells
yeah,
it or if he just does it for fun, but like you can type in a few things and get like a logo.
totally. Yeah, I've done it. I've used it. It's like instant.
Yeah.
You're like, wow, if I was, dude, it's so much crazier than that too. Like if you think about how code, like Python code works, and it's almost like an indentation hierarchy of if-then statements. I mean, it's more complicated than that, but that's the skeleton. And if there is a syntax error, like a parenthetical or a comma that isn't paralleled with it, the code won't work. And you can just take like a 30-page code input and give it to it and be like, fix this. Or I want this to do this. Explain in English what you want the code to do, and it will fix it for you. And that has come a long way very recently. So I'm sitting here thinking like, there's a lot of computer science jobs that probably just changed. There's a lot of graphical design jobs that probably just changed. I remember seeing in some Reddit thread a bunch of I think it was law school subreddit, like law students saying like, that's crazy. This will never happen. Like, it's not going to replace the being a lawyer part. It's going to make 5 lawyers' jobs the job of 1 lawyer, because now all of the like so much of the drafting and research has been or could be expedited. And so it's going to change a lot of things. And I think, just technology in general tends to make human labor less appealing. And I think the question we always come back to is that a good thing for humans? Now that we don't need truck drivers because every car is electric, I think the truck drivers have a problem with it,
Right.
right? And what are we going to do about all these people who now it doesn't happen instantly, although the AI thing's happening very fast. There's some shifts happening, and I think it's all going to go to the pockets of like some corporations, but big things.
So this might be a question for Peter. I know I didn't give you this any prep at all, and it's just like a fun opinion, or if you've heard about this. But um,
Oh no.
in China, I saw something like they have almost they call it a score, and it's like a score that you get based on
Yeah,
all kinds of stuff.
you're like social credit score.
Yes, yeah. And I saw something basically saying how if every car in the United States is an electric car, you can eventually shut down your specific power grid, or you can shut down whatever. And you could basically say, okay, you're not allowed to leave this zone. And
Mm,
then they can
yeah.
monitor you, because if you're getting in your car, they know exactly where you're at. They're tracking you in your car. Like, so
Yeah, but that's not unique to electric cars. Like I'd say all combustion new cars today have some type of that
GPS
data that tech exists on the majority of them.
and
But
your
yeah,
phone, they can track you in your phone.
yeah,
Right.
that's a good point too.
So,
Presumably.
but anyway, the social credit score thing to me is very terrifying. I don't think we would ever do that, but what do I know? I don't know. I mean, I
Yeah, so
don't.
you have this camera surveillance is everywhere today. I'd say the U.S. has enough rural areas that maybe not everywhere, but presumably all highways have some degree of this, so it'd be hard to disappear. And then, facial recognition software, if you can understand how easy it is for a computer to recreate your face, it shouldn't be that hard to recognize your face. And so now you have this idea that like all it takes is some type of regime change to where now we're ranking people to where they could very seriously limit your mobility. And I think that's kind of what you're getting at.
Yeah, very conspiracy theory. Maybe Peter would like to talk about it sometime, but
I
I'm
mean, if
like,
you're pointing at something that's currently happening somewhere else, I don't know that it's that far fetched.
right. Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. It's scary.
Yeah. Yeah. Maybe the Unabomber had it right.
What
You
did the
probably don't know. Do you
Unabomber
know
say?
anything?
I don't know
Do you
anything.
know anything about Ted
No,
Kaczynski?
no.
He was a. You should read his Wikipedia. It's pretty fascinating. He was like a famous male bomb terrorist. Actually, I think he might have set one off on a plane too. Who had like determined that the downfall of society was due to technology, and so he was like sending bombs to like university professors and politicians, I think, in the mail. And he had written a manifesto that they caught him because he was a PhD student or had it. I can't remember if he finished this. Yeah, he had a PhD in math. He's like a math prodigy and had written this uh, manifesto about why he was doing what he was doing, and the FBI like released it to in hopes that someone would recognize it. And I think it was like 80 pages and not a single grammatical error, so that they had concluded that this was a person with like a very high level of education. And his brother's wife read it and pointed it out to his brother and said, I think this is him. And his brother turned him in.
Holy smokes.
Yeah, his like he like lived in this like cabin in West Virginia or something, and the cabin itself is like at the FBI like storage, like and it's like constructed in like a storage facility. It's weird. I don't know, but the whole thing lasted like 6 or 7 years, I think. So like people were like living in terror over this for a while.
Yeah, I've definitely heard Unabomber. I mean, I've heard of it. I just never really
Yeah.
looked into it at all, and I just kind of went over my head the whole time. That's
I hope the
fascinating.
reputational thing that I get after this episode is not Maxwell said, maybe the Unabomber was right.
I'm gonna write that down. Um,
But no, if I could add a thing
yeah, yeah,
before we move on, like there's this degree of fear and almost like you're doing it the easy way to AI, generative text AI assisted whatever. And I don't think it matters. It's not going anywhere. Like people found an easier way to do this. They're not going to start doing it the hard way now. But like, I think that what did people think when we started using the typewriter instead of
yeah.
handwriting
It's just
things?
like a tool to
Well,
me.
it is a different type of tool in that now you're an editor. You tell it what you want it to write, and then you edit its writing, versus you have to manually write it versus manually type it. But there's a degree of it's going to free up more of your life for other things. It's just how can we limit it enough to where it's not dumbing people down? I don't know. I don't know the
Do you
dynamic,
really
but
think um, this has just happened a ton in my world where I can't think of a great example off the top of my head, but several times in my professional career, a new thing has come out and they've said this new technology is going to reduce the number of screens you need open and the number of tools you need to use, and it's going to save your
like
time. But,
your computer.
well, no, I mean, um, like, okay, so it used to be that we had to manually type in a lot of data onto systems. Like we would get
Hmm.
a document that was 80 pages and we had to kind of take the physical document that used to come in on paper and we had to put it on our systems.
Oh
And it
man,
took hours. And then there was an online portal and then we typed and then the portal sort of like made it quicker. And then now we're like having clients self-service and they fill it out. But
yeah,
like we aren't able to increase our capacity because new problems come up and they're unforeseen, like new things that I have to do that I didn't have to do it the old way. And so I just feel like I'm using AI. I'm putting together documents and showing them to my colleagues and I'm using AI. Like I'm like, okay, I need to write a summary of the conference I just went to. I used to think that up and write it out.
yeah,
Now I'm having AI help me do it very quickly and it looks good. And so I'm
yeah. I
getting
think
that
that
done.
you really just need to set up like standardizations, and then once they're vetted, now you can say, hey, do this, and it will reliably repeat the task, right? And that's huge for something like summarization.
Yeah, but I don't have to do that a lot. I only go to a conference like once a month, and you
Hmm.
know, I don't know. Maybe I'm able to get something more done with the time, but I don't know that it's like I'm not worried about my job right now. I do think eventually like truck drivers might lose their jobs, but I don't think that's going to happen overnight. And that's sort of happened over the last 100 years as industries change.
Yeah.
I saw somebody, it was a comedian, and he was talking about like horse shit in New York and how like they did all kinds of things to try to like prevent horses in New York, and like they didn't want the horse shit everywhere, and they did all kinds of stuff. And eventually like what killed the horses, like what
It was
got
a
rid of all
car.
the horses was Henry Ford. And it just was
Yep.
like overnight. And
Yep.
like, so yes, I do think that that's possible, but there was probably all kinds of new jobs that then came about with Henry Ford and his operation, and all the horse guys lost their job.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
I think that it gives birth to a new industry that also has some demand for employment and whatnot. But I want to come back to your point was essentially about like having marketed to you a service or a product that is supposed to make your life easier, and you're like, it doesn't. It makes this thing easier, but then I have other things to do. But I don't even know that it's necessarily the easier part. I think it's more I think that the real selling point's the reliability part. Because it's computation should be the same once you establish what you want it to do, although the input won't always be the same. So if you, I mean, if some data sets, I imagine, are relatively similar in structure, and if that's the case, it should pretty much always give you the same type of thing. And if that's the case, now you've at least know it's going to look like what you wanted. But yeah, now you have to create prompts, right? Now you have to do other things. I don't know that it's immediately making your life easier, but now you're less worried. Now you only have to be right once.
what about this? I like to compare it to Facebook came out in 2005, and it was only for college people, and eventually certain people with an email, and now anybody can use it, right?
Yeah.
And
Now anybody
today,
can steal my money on Facebook.
well, yeah, well, I mean, a whole situation happened with some people I know regarding a Facebook conversation, and a lot of people in the Facebook conversation were, grandparent age, and so they're very good at using Facebook. But in 2005 they wouldn't have been, and so like there's a learning curve to it. I'm 37-year-old, and I'm not good at new technology 37-year-old. There's probably plenty of 37-year-olds that are way better than me, but it is hard for me. I don't like taking the time to go through a whole learning curve, but I've started to do it with AI, and it's getting way like I hear about it at conferences, and somebody really clicked in my mind. They're like, it's a tool. I think you understand
Yeah.
it better than me, so you know it's more than that. But to me, I do that helps me understand it. Unlike, like you said, the typewriter, I do think it can do a lot more than I fully realized today. I think in 2 years, I start using it more. I'm going to like know it pretty well. Not as good as you still, but like eventually the 80-year-old can use Facebook like no problem, you know? And so
Yeah.
I,
Yeah, I get what you're saying about the learning curve and tools. Thankfully, it feels like because like I was just thinking as you were talking that yeah, I'm pretty sure like 80% of these just garbage newsletters I get now, I'm like, a human didn't write any of this. Like this is just some just garbage AI is just summarizing all these articles and sending me an email every day. And but similarly, there is a lot of content out there about how to use it that has emerged in the last year as and I think that's helpful for some people. I mean, obviously like within a work context, most people just need it to do like one thing reasonably that would help them a lot. And so I always learn by doing. So I'm kind of just like, I remember showing my whole family this, like, how to use ChatGPT, and they were just like, "What the hell is this?" And I'm like, "Yeah, but just ask it whatever you want. Ask it to do something, because and especially if it's something you already know how to do, then you can evaluate whether it did it right,
Yeah.
and you can tell it what it did wrong, and then let it try again." And I think that that's very tangible learning curve. It just seems very weird. It seems impossible.
Yeah.
So people are like, it's not going to do it right. I'm like, try it. It will. It might. I don't know. It might be wrong. Like,
I think
you
once
can't.
you like, I don't know if it should even be branded AI because it's not really an intelligent being. It's just a
Yeah.
language. It just understands language really well.
The text generation thing is really just they're large language models is like the industry way to refer to them. It's just AI. People imagine a robot talking to them, and so this is what this feels like. Uh, it's 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 really not though. It really is just like pattern recognition.
Yeah.
So in large part, like everything about a computer is sort of patterns. And so it makes sense. It's just computers are really getting a lot more powerful and a lot more compact than they used to be. Like I always say that, you were talking about things changing your life, and I thought you were going here, but you went to hey, they produce new problems angle. But like I remember, if you talk to people about the tech that changed their life the most, no one says it, but it's the smartphone.
Oh yeah.
Because prior to, I mean, I think of it as the Apple iPhone. I think there may have been one or two before that that were Android, and obviously, like you had BlackBerry and Palm Pilots, and there's a fantastic movie about BlackBerry, by the way, that you should watch because it's just like they just royally screwed the opportunity
Oh
to
yeah.
be Apple. But like you don't even think about it now because it's such a big part of your life now. How many people don't own computers that would have needed to own a computer uh, 20 years ago? Because everything they need a computer to do, their phone can do. Like people who don't use a computer for work, I've seen, yeah, I would say half of the people out there don't need a computer and now they just don't have one.
They just
But in the
don't. They just use
past,
their phone. Do they have an iPad?
yeah, what do they need a computer for? To read articles, to check their email, to get on
Do
social
you?
media? There's an app for that,
Yeah.
you know? I honestly would go as far as to say if you are not using Word, or if you're not interacting with documents, reading or writing very frequently, you'd be totally fine with a tablet. Like I
Okay, so
can't
you're
use
not
one.
considering a tablet a computer then. It's like,
I actually still would, but I think even if you're not doing any of those things, I think most people don't have a tablet either. I think they just have their phone,
I mean, that's
you
a
know?
little weird. I don't like how small the phone is for certain
Yeah.
things, you know? I do like,
Yeah, it definitely feels like it's not a computer, but it is.
right. I mean, Alex has an iPad Pro and she has the magic keyboard. You know what I'm
Mm-hmm.
talking about? I think you probably do too. And
Oh, I hate it.
she she doesn't have a computer. So
Yeah,
she
that's all
just
she
uses
uses,
that.
right?
Yeah.
I just don't think it's funny how like Microsoft Office is still just like the gold standard. And I even read some funny thing the other day on Reddit that like Office works better on Macs than it does on Windows, but it still works better than I can't remember. It's like pages numbers, the Apple Office suite
Yeah,
does. And
I hate the
and
Apple
it's
Office
like,
stuff.
yeah, I don't like it either. And it doesn't, it's like if you work in business, everybody has a Windows computer. So like
Mhm.
you got to be able to use Office or something's going to get screwed up. Formatting's going to get, dude, this is like an art form to using Office. And once you figure it out, just like don't change it. So
Yeah.
that doesn't work as well on the tablets. And it's weird because like Google Docs kind of changed the way that we interacted with cloud storage, and to the point where now you can basically use Microsoft Office in a browser, but it's still not quite the same. Like we have documents at work that are stored on our server. So like I'll click the link in the email and it will open online on like Microsoft SharePoint or something, and I have to download it because there's something that needed to be edited. Like half the reason they send it to me is like something needs to be fixed, and I'm like, yeah, you just can't. I can't get it to do it on Office 365. I have to do it on my computer. It's like that you don't have quite the same options, or I mean, this is a relatively minor issue. This may be completely solved very soon, but I can't. I feel like I can't rely on a tablet. I have to have a laptop. You know.
Yeah, no, I prefer the laptop too. But you're right. If you don't need it for work, why are you? You might not need it. Okay,
It is weird.
I want to ask you a legal question about House of the Dragon. Did you see what I that
Oh my
that?
God. Yeah. I saw it, and what's this? Okay, just what's this pod? Is it a podcast that you're listening to that's analyzing Game of Thrones?
Oh no, it's a YouTube channel.
Okay. I wanna check it out.
I'll send it to you.
Um but what was the question? I read part of it,
Okay,
and
so
it's funny because a friend just asked me like a wills question today. Like and will as trust estates and wills are obviously not my practice area at all. And for most issues, it's not that complicated, but the terms are all just bizarre and weird. They're like not in any other type of law. And so, of course, I'm like Googling stuff and I'm thinking they probably just think I know all of this. And so then you followed up today with, I'm like,
yeah.
great, this is just never ending.
Well, okay, so just for everybody listening, Maxwell is a lawyer and he knows basically the entire law. So he's going to know this
And crypto.
and everything there is to know about crypto.
It was
Okay.
like the question, yeah, just read it. Just read it to me.
Well, yeah, so I'll kind of set the scene here and then you just, pontificate about whatever you think. But so this is House of the Dragon, and just no spoilers here. This is stuff from season 1. Okay, so this has already been out there, but so King Viserys, he names his daughter Rhaenyra as his heir, and he does this publicly in front of all of the major people in the realm. They all come to the courthouse, they bend the knee. He doesn't have a son. He's got this daughter. She's like 10, and he just publicly says, "She's my heir." Which, when it happened, was kind of a big deal because the way he got put into place was his grandfather became super old, like over 100, and he had a great council. And well, he died, and then they had a great council to determine out of all these Targaryens who should take place, and the oldest one was a female, and they ended up skipping her and going to like his
Hmm.
like his like dead son's son. So they skipped the
Yeah.
female line all because the female had a son. So they could have gone with the oldest daughter's next son,
Yep.
but they skipped that. Went to the oldest son, even though he was dead son, and got this guy named Viserys. So they skipped the female line,
It's
but
like
then
gotta be male to male to male lineage, right?
yeah, I guess it's called male preference primogeniture. I can't say that word.
Yeah. Primogeniture.
Yes. So this stands for like 15 to 20 years. Then he gets remarried. And with his new wife, he has a son. And it's kind of talked about like there's starting to be rumblings like, okay, well, is the son going to become the heir? Like we all assume that. And then it's like it kind of comes to a head. He's forced to address it publicly. And he says, nope, my daughter's still the heir. And then he
Hmm.
continues to live for like another 15 years. And then on his deathbed, he is talking to his wife, but he's kind of like fallen in and out of it. She honestly believes that he says, My intention is to change my mind, and my son is my heir. Now, she's not making this up. She thinks that's what he actually said. We, as the audience, know that that's not exactly what he was saying. But that's what she believes. And so then the question is, let's just assume that that is what he was saying. He did change his mind, but no one else heard it. And so he
Mm-hmm.
tells her. She's the queen, but there's a whole faction of people that are going to support Rhaenyra, and then there's a faction of people that are going to support her. But my question is, who legally should inherit with this situation?
So for starters, I have seen this, by the way. I know you're setting a stage, but I was like, I know this, Trevor. I know this whole story. And I also can't recall. I felt like he did know that wasn't what he intended, but I wasn't paying that much attention in the recap, and I guess it's been like 2 years. So I'm gonna just take what you said at face value. So she's got Rhaenyra has been basically designated as the heir apparent in well, it's not in a will, but it's in like it's been publicly designated. So let's just call that the recording. By the way, I mean, so in one hand, I want to just address that like I'm going to answer this in today's world and try and address like then, because at that point in time you have all these other dynamics too. It's like a feudalistic society. It's not just like a will, um, conveying rights to an heir. It's also like there's this degree of feudalistic acceptance of the ruler that they don't hash this out in the show this way, but I mean, he could convey it to anybody he wants. If the people won't be ruled by that person, it won't matter. It's not his to give necessarily. Like
Yeah.
he can give them whatever he has, but he no longer has it once he dies. Now it's whatever he gave them, and they may not be willing to reinforce that. So setting aside that, right? Like there's this. I feel like your question is primarily about whether or not you can change your mind uh, because it was publicly declared, right? But if I recall correctly, at the beginning of the show, what's his brother's name?
Damon.
Damon's the heir apparent. There's always an heir apparent.
So Damon was
As
the heir before he publicly
before he
said it
had a
was his
son.
daughter Rhaenyra. It had been publicly named Damon.
Well, it was Damon, and then he had a son, and the son died after a day.
Yes. And
So
then
Damon
that was the
lost it
trigger.
by default,
Yes, you're right.
right?
So he already had Rhaenyra. He didn't really say anything. It was kind of like it's probably Damon, but maybe it's actually Rhaenyra. It
I
was up in the
My
air. Then
understanding
he
is
had
that
his son.
it goes to Damon just like that's the order because he's the male brother. And then like if Damon had a son and Damon had died, but the problem was in the original scenario that like it was just a woman, not another man, and then the woman had a male son. Like what is his name again? Who's the original king? King A something? God, I hate the
Oh,
names of
the
everything.
very first king was King Aegon.
Aegon, and then who's Rhaenyra's dad? Is it Aegon?
Oh
That's not
no,
Aegon.
Aegon is like 100
Aegon's the
years before
OG
this.
one.
Yeah.
Who's Rhaenyra's dad?
Rhaenyra's dad is Viserys, the guy we're talking
V-
about. Yeah.
Viserys. So Viserys is Aegon's nephew.
There's several generations. The old king that I referenced, his name was Jaehaerys, and
Jaehaerys.
he's like the fourth or fifth king after Aegon.
Okay. So, anyways, I guess to address, let's just address this with today's rules. I know in Texas, I don't know everywhere, but I assume this is the case everywhere because it was on the bar this way. That there has to be two witnesses,
Oh,
and
okay.
I
That's
mean,
pretty cool.
in theory, and it's not even. the witnesses are just saying that they know who he is and that he wrote the will. They're not saying that they agree or whatever. And it's writing. It is not a he said this.
Oh, it has to
Like
be
if
in
this,
writing.
yeah, well, it has to be a writing that's signed, or it could be a holographic will if it's in their own handwriting. Basically, meaning that like they wrote it themselves, and we can, in theory, we could objectively through some forensic analysis prove that if this was disputed. But in this scenario, and this is really the problem, right? She absolutely usurps the throne from Rhaenyra because
Wait.
there was no objective way for anyone to prove that this was said.
Well, okay. So actually, Rhaenyra is the daughter that he said should his later wife. Um, that's the one
Yeah,
that usurped the throne, not Rhaenyra.
right. That's
Yeah.
what I mean.
Okay.
That's what I mean.
Yeah. Okay.
So Rhaenyra is the heir apparent, and the heir apparent was never changed, despite him having a son later in life.
Yes.
So in today's rules, she wouldn't have the. I mean, I'm trying to apply American law to a feudalistic
This
set
is what
of rules.
happens in
So,
the YouTube channel too. They
really,
constantly talk about how, like, okay, so what they're trying to say is the law back then versus what it would be today. And so you can't, there is no real right or wrong answer, but it's just
it's not a. It
interesting to
doesn't
think about.
transfer perfectly, right? But yeah,
Right.
I do think it's interesting because you could see a scenario like this where they're like, well, actually, they said I want my son to take over the company, and
Yeah.
yeah, that wouldn't hold up. You'd have to. I mean, you'd have to go to probate and try and prove it somehow. But generally speaking, so you have a will. You could renounce your. I guess this is the way it might have worked in theory. You can renounce a previous last will and testament without creating a new one, which I almost positive has to be in writing as well. And in that case, it would just revert to the traditional rules, which would be the oldest son. Maybe make that argument. But I mean, and I also know how this story goes in the show and the future of it, and it doesn't go well. It's really Game of Thrones is just such a tragic everything, but it's hard not to really feel for her because everyone knows it was stolen from her.
Yeah.
Everyone in that castle knows, and similarly, it does feel like the people are more willing to accept the son, which
Right.
society at the time. But and then you see, God, the the black guy with the dreads and his wife
Yeah.
basically
Valerian.
leave. Yeah, they leave and support Rhaenyra because of that, right?
Well, I mean, there's so many different interconnecting plots, but so he ends up marrying when Viserys got when he ended up getting it from the Great Council, the woman that I said that he kind of took it over ends up marrying, I think his name's,
That's
uh,
that's that's
she ends
her,
up,
isn't it?
yes, she's elderly now, but she was much younger because remember, Viserys took over as a
Yeah.
young man. So
Mm.
she was supposed to be queen, and she's kind of called the queen that never was. And she married Valerian. The guy that's
So
his
that's
last name.
why everyone's kind of like, well, does she support Rhaenyra? This happened to her.
Well, she does, but um, their their son ended up marrying Rhaenyra. Now he was the one that was gay secretly, kind
Yeah,
of.
Laenor.
Yeah. So then remember, she ends up having a couple of children with the strong guy, but they just like said that
Uh-huh.
they were with him when
They're like
everybody knew they
obviously
weren't.
not his kids. Yeah.
Yeah. But that's why mainly why they supported her is because um I mean they were very interconnected with their family lines. And then
Hmm.
Damon supported her and Damon ended up marrying a Valerian as well. And that kind of fell
Yeah.
through. And now Rhaenyra and Damon are going to get together, but like that's why they're all interconnected. And you can see, like, you're right that a lot of people on the green side, they know that they're kind of usurping the throne. But if they win, and they go with the
Yeah.
greens. I mean, they're trying to pick the winning side, and then all of a sudden they,
History's written by the victors, right? They can say
yeah,
whatever they want.
yeah. And it
I do
does look
think,
like the green side's going to win because the blacks were all on Dragonstone. They didn't even know the king died. And so the
yeah.
greens are like right there. They're like, well, we're already here. So, you know,
And then she crashes through in her dragon.
that was sweet.
Yeah,
That doesn't happen in the
that was
books.
bold.
Yeah.
No, that was badass. I really think I would almost say they did a better job with House of the Dragon, at least appealing to a wider audience because Game of Thrones, you get like 3 seasons of Game of Thrones in the first season of House of the Dragon.
Yeah.
And Game of Thrones doesn't time jump that way even across the season, but like they give you all of the background in like 6 episodes. And I think it's just easier for people to digest that way. Now we're in the actual story,
Yep.
and you didn't have to go through this. I love Game of Thrones, and you're so invested in it because there's such a slow burn in the development. But bypassing that for House of the Dragon really, I think it gave it legs faster. And I mean, they probably could have done whatever they wanted. People would watch anything. But and I was watching it, on my new OLED, and I'm like, God, this production value on this show is phenomenal.
Okay,
Like,
let me ask you, have you gone back and rewatched season 1?
yeah, Caitlin and I did,
Okay.
but I think we only made it to like 6.
Well, I find it interesting that when I went through it the first time, I was like, okay, I was pissed when Game of Thrones ended, and now I'm like loving this. So I do love it. And I was very
Yeah,
excited, but I haven't rewatched it. I think part of it is there was 3 childbirth scenes, and
yeah, it's
it's just
rough.
hard to watch. And I'm not even talking about anything specific. It was hard for me to watch a year and a half or 2 years ago because it's just
Yeah,
intense. It's 3 of them.
dude. The
I don't really want to
I
rewatch
actually
that.
commented on this to Caitlin because I mean, obviously the show's layered. They give everyone good and bad characteristics, and that's why it's such a relatable, conflicting. Uh, what's the word I'm looking for? Enterprise, Game of Thrones, right? So Viserys cuts his wife open, kills her, takes the baby. Baby
Yeah.
dies, and there's there's an element of duty to part of it, and then there's an element of like, how could you do that to her,
I
right?
mean, that's an interesting debate. It's like, which one do you choose in that scenario? And yeah,
Yeah, you choose your wife.
that's what
Duh.
that's 100% what I would
Are
pick.
you
But,
right? And
but I
so
don't know that that's
Damon's
what they picked a lot
portrayed.
back then.
I don't know either. He's probably thinking I can get a new wife, but they've been together a long time. I don't know. Like they don't portray him as not loving his wife. They just portray him as really, really, really wanting a son because, need to carry the line on. And why? Why? And I mean, that's what they're layering this whole time is you have a kid and you're just going to have to stand beside her and make this work. And so the problem, interestingly, he creates by killing his wife and then getting a new wife because that would have never happened if he hadn't done this. But what I found fascinating and what I'm really getting at here is that Damon is portrayed in so many ways as this much more selfish and kind of like ruthless person. And there's that same scene with his wife where they can't get the baby out. And I had her back it up and I watched it again. I was like, I don't feel, and then she kills herself with the dragon. I'm like, it didn't seem like he was saying cut her open and take the baby out. It seemed like he was saying no. And so I'm like, this is such an interesting juxtaposition because you have this guy that's always made out to be the bad one, and then this noble old king. And he didn't seem to cross that line. And I was like, this is fascinating. It's like the worst thing the other one ever did, this bad character didn't seem to consider.
Um, I'm gonna read
But I
this.
don't know. I don't know what your take on that was because they don't say he doesn't say no.
No, my take is
Yeah,
that Damon chose to save his wife, just like what you're
right.
saying.
Okay.
Um, George, I'm gonna try to find this, but
George
George
R.
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 R. Martin
Martin.
talks up Damon. He's saying he describes him as his like second or third favorite character ever that he's ever written about, or
Really?
second or favorite. I should say second or third favorite Targaryen, but he's the rogue prince. He's he is the epitome of everything a Targaryen is. Um,
Nice.
Daemon was hated and loved in equal measure, reviled and adored, a hero and a villain. He doesn't just talk like this about his writing and interviews. He says the same stuff, talks about how much he likes Daemon and how you never know if he's going to do something heroic or monstrous.
I really do. I really do agree with that, and I like him a lot as a character, even though I do feel like he's chaotic. He's like chaotic good almost. I don't know if it's chaotic good or chaotic neutral. He
Well,
feels like chaotic good in that he seems to want his. It's like his heart is good, but he's selfish.
what's really cool about him is he desperately wanted to be king. He kind of worked through it and accepted that he's not going to be king, but he did. If you read the book, he wanted to be king.
Yeah,
And he didn't think his brother was a good king. But he's very Targaryen, meaning like he speaks the old tongue. And so you'll see sometimes in season one, he's like talking in old Valyrian instead of the common tongue. He's like, we
yeah.
should marry in the family lines and move the bloodline along. Targaryens are about blood and fire. We are the blood of the dragon. We don't, you know, it's not about peace. Like we are better. They believe
I
they're
mean,
literally
wasn't
like
his
God.
brother also married to a Targaryen? They were
Yeah,
both
but
like bleach blonde.
Viserys is like conflict avoider and always chooses
Right.
the path of like avoiding conflict. And Daemon is like, we are gods, then
I will fight you.
Targaryens. Well, Daemon's like,
Right.
we're
Yeah.
better than everybody else. We don't have to follow the
Yeah.
rules. If you oppose me, we will just kill you. But like, no matter how much Daemon wanted to be king, he like he would never have harmed his brother. I mean, I think he wished that his brother. He didn't want his brother to die or anything. I think he just wanted to be king, but like he couldn't have it both ways, and he always supported his brother in the end. Even there was a while where he like walks away, and I think he's gone for a while, kind of doing his own thing. But ultimately, he comes back and he just bends the knee to his brother. And he doesn't even really respect his brother, but like he's a Targaryen and he's the older brother. And so that's just the way it
Yeah.
is. And
Yeah.
so he kind of accepts that. Then ultimately, he ends up like marrying or getting with Rhaenyra, and he never tries to take her throne. He's, he accepts that she's the queen, and that would have been such an easy way for him to be like, okay, I'm
Yeah.
actually the way, I'm the man, but he doesn't. Like, so it's just, you know, he kind of has his own like code that he won't break.
Yeah. I like that. He's got his own code. It's like hierarchy of duty.
Yeah,
It was good. I do interest. I do like a complex character that seems to have a compass. You just can't see what it is.
yeah, but like he's also in the books, um, like married to this woman in the
Yeah.
Vale of Aaron, and like totally ditched her. And I
He
think
kills her in
later
the
he
show, right?
kills her. Yeah, because he needs to be not married. Um, he does horrible things. I mean,
Yeah.
the whole thing at the Blood and Cheese with the end of this first episode, like that was
Oh yeah,
definitely
dude.
in the books, and he totally orchestrates that. You know,
Son for a son.
and it's very in the books. Like it's written as an in-world history novel. One maester writes it, but he uses all these different sources. And the maester doesn't know what happened because he's writing it like 150 years later. So he'll be like, okay, so, so and so says that Damon killed her. so and so says that, conveniently she fell and died and got, like whatever.
Yeah.
And so like no one knows for
So
a
what they
fact.
choose to give you in the show is reality, but like what you read in the book is it's sort of like unverified.
Yeah, the show does have to make choices sometimes and say this is what happened, but did you like catch how Damon, when he's talking to the guy, says, I want you to get Aemon Targaryen. And then like he says, right as they're about to go in, he's like, what if I
Yeah,
can't find him?
that's what I thought too.
And then it cuts away. It doesn't You don't get to see what Damon says. And then later when they're in there, he says a son for a son. And it's implied that Damon must have told him that, but we didn't hear Damon say that. And like,
Yeah.
so Damon, he does all these things. Like in the book, it's not confirmed that he killed his wife, but it is confirmed that like he,
He died.
it's implied that he needed to not be married and he went up there to see her and then she died, you know?
Right.
So
Yeah.
the book, it's just written really well. And so far the story's going is good, but I thought it was a great example and something fun to kind of to just explore with, all the legal side of it. So
Oh yeah, I need to check this YouTube channel out. There's a lot of good TV out right now as well, and I know I noted that with you because I was just like, I really love the show The Boys. I think it's fascinating. It's
Alex
so
loves that.
graphic. Yeah, and yeah, you told me that. And this new season seems just it seems like it's progressing in the right way. I thought the last season ended. I thought the last season would have been a good last season. Um, but it's Soldier Boy and everything, and I don't know what's going to happen next. And obviously, there's comics, and the comics are very different. Um, but I was watching that just like, oh man, like we've got, and there's another show on Apple TV called Presumed Innocent with Jake Gyllenhaal that's just phenomenal.
I've seen that movie.
Yeah.
That's a movie, right?
Well, yeah, it's a remake of that, and I don't know if it follows it because I'm not going to ruin it for myself. But he is. I mean, Jake Gyllenhaal is just great.
Oh, so
I
this
love
is
like
a
everything he's
TV
in.
show about the movie?
It's the same story, I think, but it's a TV show on Apple TV, so it's like 8 episodes instead of a movie. And there's only two out, so you don't really know what's going to happen.
Actually, I might be thinking
It's
of something different. I'm thinking of one with like Chris Evans and it's
Oh
like
yeah,
his
that's
son.
another Apple TV show called Defending Jacob. It has a really similar vibe.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know anything about the one you just described.
It just came out last week. You should check it out.
Okay.
What else do you want me to analyze? This is always fun. I feel like this is like a mental workout.
Well,
But
dude,
also,
we've been
we don't live near each other anymore, so I feel like, we gotta pump like all of our opinions about everything into one quarterly podcast.
I'm open to doing this more often. I love visiting with you on this stuff. I mean, we've been talking for over 2 hours. I think we're probably okay. But some things to think about. I mean, I'd be interested in getting your thoughts on the Alec Baldwin case. I
Yeah.
don't know everything there is to know about it, but it's fascinating to me. And it's like, unfortunately, someone passed away. And is it his
Yeah.
fault or was it his fault? What? I
Well,
don't know.
what
I'm
I always
sure
came back to is like he produced the movie, so in theory, he's got liability in
he
a couple
also
different
pulled the trigger
directions.
himself, right?
Yeah, I don't think I don't know what the reasoning was. I don't think I don't think he is expected as an actor to have verified that it has blanks. But I think as a producer, he's ultimately liable for hiring the person who was responsible, who was the firearms specialist who, put live rounds in a. This whole thing is like tragic, but also like maybe a little suspect. And I don't have a problem with him still being held liable somehow. It's going to be interesting how that sentencing goes.
Was there any motive though, or is it all just negligence?
Yeah, it was. I think he's been charged again with involuntary manslaughter, which is ultimately negligence. It doesn't have the intent to cause the death, but he had the intent to cause the action that caused the death. Be that hiring the person or pulling the trigger. So I don't remember which way they used to decide, but there are multiple ways that he could ultimately be liable.
Another topic that, well, two, actually, I'm just going to name a whole bunch of them. I think it'd be interesting to talk about Aaron Rodgers. He just did his ayahuasca retreat. So maybe next time. Elon Musk said Apple has no clue what's actually going on once you're hand.
Yeah.
I thought that was cool.
This new
Um,
Apple intelligence thing, it came out so quick and I've been busy, but like I really need to dig into how that works. It seems like it's just an interface with ChatGPT somehow. But yeah, I really feel like we need to do like a whole like football, fantasy football, Aaron Rodgers, ayahuasca predictions things episode because it's just like there is so much narrative in football now that like, as a fan, I'm interested in, as it
yeah.
affects fantasy, interested in. And it's crazy, like football's over, but then it's back and we're not
Oh
that far
yeah.
away.
The
I'm like, oh,
NFL is
thank God.
the best. They control the whole calendar. They have something like
Yeah.
every month or so, every 6 weeks.
People think it's the Mayans, but it's actually Roger Goodell created the 12-month calendar.
um, Benjamin Franklin's home found with dead bodies in the basement. I just think that's super weird. But this topic, I don't really know where to go with it, or if you have if you care about this or have any thoughts on it. But um, I've started to get this idea in my head, probably just from the algorithm sending me stuff, but that the United States it used to be kind of a catchy thing to be like, it's not actually the greatest country in the world. Here's the greatest at this topic and crime and education and whatever. And now I'm starting to like think that actually it might be a better quality of life to live in another country, and it might be possible to move there. And what would
Mm,
it look like to live in another country? And I'm mostly thinking of Europe, but I think we know of somebody that moved to another country that seems to be enjoying life. And part of the reason I'm thinking this is like with the cost of living, with rent and with home prices going up, I don't see how it's getting to a point where if you haven't if you don't buy a home soon or don't already
yeah.
own one, it's going to be hard. And rent's going up with it. And so it seems like there's this divide of middle class that's getting huge. And there's going to be a lot of people that are probably considered like low, struggling based on just how do you afford your living? Like, how do you afford the roof over your home? So, um, and then I don't want to get too into like doomsday, like illegal immigrants over veterans and all that. I'm really just more interested in like the European culture and not being so
Yeah.
stressed on work, like how they like to enjoy life, food. They're very big on like taking lots of PTO. Like they kind of famously take the month of August off. They travel all over. So many people in the United States have never been to Canada or Mexico. They never leave the United States. And if you're born in like England, you've probably been to 10 countries by the time you're like 18. And so now I have a friend that moved here from France and it was his dream to move here and he says it's better here. So he would disagree with
Yeah.
some of this. But like I look at a lot of European stuff and I just think to myself, that seems better. But then I come from a long line of like family members that are in the military, and there's police officers in my family, and there's my dad was in the Navy, and then we've got like people in the Marines, and there's a lot of like patriotism that's kind of dwindled a little bit, but
Sure, sure.
it's like I don't want
Yeah,
to sound like
the
I'm
question that you asked.
anti-America because I'm not.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I don't want to be shamed for just posing this question and being like, let's take a deep dive. Would it be a better quality of life for my daughters and for me to think about like relocating? I don't know, you know?
You got enough money, you can do whatever you want, right? But I think ultimately some of these differences come from the United States is an inherently less homogenous place than smaller countries, both in population and in size. The United States has a more recent problematic history with, a large portion of the country being slaves. So there are less unifiers here than some other places, and you're seeing tension in these other places with, rising immigration and less, homogeny. But the question that you sent that I thought was interesting was, um, why do we treat immigrants better than veterans? And the thing that stuck out to me after thinking for a second was, it's an interesting way to phrase, uh, we treat one party bad and one other party good. And to make things fair, we should treat them both bad. Like clearly, sure we treat immigrants arguably better here than just about anywhere else in the world. Um, Although, I don't know that it's necessarily that different from countries in Europe. We definitely treat our veterans a lot worse. And I don't know that the solution to how bad we treat our veterans is to not to treat immigrants well. It's clearly we just have less of a social safety net in the United States. And it's the same thing that enables you some of the degrees of agency and mobility that have led to some degree of success. Um, in Europe, I think you probably have a little bit less of that because you have a little bit less disposable income. You probably find it harder to fail. I don't know which is better. Once I've succeeded, I'd obviously tell you that this way is better, but I know people who basically have had a lifetime of struggle, and I think that they might have benefited from a place where it was harder and less painful to fail. So I think when you're asking about like my kids and what do I do, and is this something that like what's the thought experiment about this look like? I think ultimately you're always bound by the community that you're in. What kind of community do you want to be bound by, and can you find that community here? Uh, I think that you can, but there are different roadblocks. There are probably fewer roadblocks, but it's harder to enact change because the government doesn't have quite the same power here. So I think that's ultimately a good thing, although it appears to be changing.
All right. Well, maybe we'll dive into it more next time.
Yeah, I'd
Um,
love to. I love having like a research topic. That's good.
Thank you for coming on. Is there any last thoughts you had, or what do you think?
Dude, I love you, man. It's always such a pleasure to just sit down and like pick each other's brains. You know, it's fun just to see your house, see you living in a different place. I really got to come up there, but no, I'd like to come on more, and I'd like to keep our mind meld going. So thank you, and I hope we can do this again soon.